The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly before Commander Syra Vex, her glowing blue skin reflecting faintly off the transparent viewport of her flagship, the luminal tide asterisk. She stood tall, her slender frame radiating authority as she surveyed the dark void ahead. Behind her, rows of Zentari officers worked silently at their stations, their movements precise and efficient. The hum of the ship's engines filled the air, a constant reminder that they were not alone in this cold, unyielding universe. Syra was no stranger to war. For decades, she had led her people, the bioluminescent Zentari, against countless insurgent forces threatening their empire. Her tactical brilliance had earned her respect and fear among allies and enemies alike. Yet today, something felt different. Something about this mission unsettled her in ways she couldn't quite explain. Ahead lay what reconnaissance drones had identified as humanity's last stronghold, a cluster of battered ships orbiting a desolate planetoid. These humans, once thought extinct after abandoning their dying homeworld centuries ago, had somehow survived. Now they posed a threat to the stability of the Zentari Empire, or so the reports claimed. But as Syra stared into the silence of space surrounding the human fleet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There were no transmissions, no signs of hostility, only an eerie stillness that seemed almost deliberate. It reminded her of old stories passed down through generations, tales of Earth and its long-lost inhabitants. Those stories spoke of chaos, yes, but also resilience, ingenuity, and even beauty. Her second-in-command, Threxen, approached cautiously. His sharp features betrayed concern as he addressed her. "Commander," he began, his voice low but firm, "we should strike now while we hold the advantage. Every moment we delay gives them time to prepare." Syra didn't turn to face him immediately. Instead, she continued to study the distant fleet. Finally, she spoke, her tone measured yet tinged with hesitation. "And what do we truly know of these humans, Threxen? Are they insurgents like those we faced before, or are they simply trying to survive?" Threxen frowned, clearly taken aback by her question. "Does it matter? They occupy territory vital to our expansion. If we don't act decisively, others may see us as weak." Syra sighed softly, her luminescence dimming slightly, an involuntary reaction betraying her inner turmoil. She knew Threxen was right, at least according to the rigid doctrines of Zentari warfare. But something deep within her resisted the idea of unleashing destruction without understanding why. Perhaps it was the strange familiarity she felt when looking at the scattered remnants of human artifacts floating near the fleet. Pieces of rusted metal, faded photographs, and fragments of text written in languages she barely recognized stirred emotions she hadn't felt in years. As if sensing her unease, one of the junior officers interrupted nervously. "Commander, we've detected faint energy signatures coming from their vessels. They appear to be minimal, almost as though they're conserving resources." "Conserving resources," Syra murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could these humans truly be refugees rather than warriors? If so, then attacking them would make the Zentari no better than the tyrants who had driven her own ancestors from their original home. For now, she gave no orders to advance or retreat. Instead, she instructed her crew to gather more intelligence while maintaining their position. As the hours ticked by, the weight of leadership pressed heavily on her shoulders. Whatever decision she made next would shape not only the fate of her people, but perhaps the future of two civilizations teetering on the brink of either harmony or annihilation. In the silence of the bridge, Syra clenched her fists tightly, her resolve beginning to crystallize. This battle wouldn't be won or lost with brute force alone. It would demand something far greater: courage, empathy, and a willingness to question everything she thought she knew about war. This version introduces the main character, establishes the setting, and creates intrigue around the mysterious human fleet, all while keeping the narrative engaging and simple enough for readers to follow easily. The derelict space station loomed ahead, its battered hull glinting faintly in the light of a distant star. Commander Syra Vex stood on the bridge of her shuttlecraft, her glowing form casting an ethereal blue hue across the cramped interior. Beside her sat two of her most trusted officers, their expressions tense but resolute. The journey to the summit had been silent, each passenger lost in their own thoughts as they approached what could either be a turning point for peace or a deadly trap. On the human side, Captain Elias Kane prepared similarly. His weathered face betrayed no fear, though his knuckles were white from gripping the armrests of his seat. Around him, a small contingent of loyal crew members checked their weapons one last time, ensuring they were ready for any outcome. Trust was scarce among both parties, and paranoia hung thick in the air like static electricity. When the two groups finally met aboard the station, the tension was palpable. Syra stepped out first, her tall frame radiating authority despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. She scanned the dimly lit corridor, her sharp eyes landing on Captain Kane as he emerged from the opposite end. He was shorter than she'd imagined, with graying hair and lines etched deeply into his face, marks of a man who had endured far too much. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply observed each other, sizing up not just appearances but intentions. Finally, Syra broke the silence. "Captain Kane," she said, her voice steady but warm. "Thank you for coming." Kane nodded curtly, his tone cautious yet respectful. "Commander Vex, let's hope this doesn't turn into another battlefield." Their initial exchanges were guarded, filled with diplomatic niceties that masked underlying suspicion. But as they moved deeper into the station and settled around a makeshift table illuminated by flickering emergency lights, cracks began to form in their armor. Syra shared stories of the Zentare's struggles, their flight from extinction, their quest for harmony amidst chaos. In return, Kane recounted Earth's final days, cities drowning in rising seas, skies choked with ash, and humanity's desperate scramble to escape before it was too late. Their shared pain became a bridge, however fragile. As hours passed, the conversation shifted from survival to dreams of renewal. Kane pulled up holographic records of Earth's beauty, its lush forests, sprawling oceans, and vibrant cultures. Watching these images, Syra felt a pang of sorrow for a world she'd never known but now mourned alongside its descendants. In turn, she showed Kane fragments of Zentare art and philosophy, emphasizing their belief in balance and coexistence. Yet even as trust began to blossom between them, shadows lurked outside their circle of light. Back aboard Asterisk, the luminal tide Asterisk, whispers of mutiny spread among hardline Zentare officers who viewed Syra's diplomacy as weakness. Threxen, her second-in-command, struggled to maintain order, his loyalty torn between duty and admiration for Syra's vision. Meanwhile, radical elements within the human fleet accused Kane of betrayal, arguing that peace with the Zentare would only delay the inevitable slaughter. Unknown to both leaders, saboteurs from both sides had infiltrated the station during the summit. Hidden away in darkened corridors, they planted explosives, determined to shatter any chance of reconciliation. Their motives varied. Some sought revenge, others feared change. But their goal was the same: to ensure war continued at all costs. As the meeting drew to a close, Syra and Kane drafted a tentative ceasefire agreement, outlining steps toward cooperation and mutual understanding. Just as they prepared to sign the document, alarms blared through the station. The lights flickered violently, plunging the room into near darkness. "What's happening?" Kane demanded, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. Syra's bioluminescence flared brighter, illuminating the panicked faces around her. "We're under attack," she said grimly, already moving toward the source of the disturbance. Explosions rocked the station, sending debris flying and forcing everyone to take cover. In that moment, enemies became allies. Syra and Kane exchanged a glance, a silent pact forged in crisis. Together, they fought their way through collapsing hallways, fending off unseen assailants while trying to disable the bombs. Each step tested their resolve, but also strengthened their bond. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future they had glimpsed together. a future where hatred gave way to hope. As flames licked at the walls and oxygen levels dropped dangerously low, Syra realized something profound. Sometimes, unity wasn't born from words or treaties. It was forged in the fires of adversity. And if they survived this night, nothing would ever tear them apart again. The asteroid base loomed ahead, its jagged surface glinting menacingly under the light of a distant star. Commander Syra Vex and Captain Elias Kane stood side by side on the bridge of their joint command vessel, their combined fleets forming an imposing armada behind them. The air was thick with tension, but also resolve. This was no longer just a mission. It was a fight for survival, for peace, and for the future of both their peoples. As they approached the heavily fortified structure, it became clear that Aegis Prime was prepared for their arrival. Automated defense turrets swiveled into position, firing barrages of energy blasts at the incoming ships. Explosions lit up the void of space as fighters from both fleets darted through the chaos, engaging enemy drones while shielding larger vessels from harm. Syra clenched her fists tightly, watching the battle unfold on the main view screen. "We need to disable those turrets," she said sharply, turning to her tactical officer. "Focus fire on the outer defenses, create an opening." Kane nodded in agreement, his voice calm but urgent. "Once we breach the perimeter, my team will lead the ground assault. We'll infiltrate the core and shut down Aegis Prime from within." Syra hesitated for a moment, concern flickering across her glowing features. "It's too dangerous, Kane. Let me go with you." He met her gaze firmly, shaking his head. "No, your place is here, leading the fleet. If anything happens to you, your people lose hope. My crew trusts me. I have to do this." Reluctantly, Syra conceded. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her bioluminescence dimming slightly in gratitude. "Then bring everyone back alive." With a final nod, Kane departed, leading a small strike team aboard a shuttlecraft that slipped past the crumbling defenses. As they landed inside the asteroid base, Syra directed her fleet to maintain pressure on the automated systems, buying time for Kane's team to reach the ice core. Inside the base, Kane and his squad moved cautiously through dark corridors, lined with pulsating wires and humming machinery. Every step felt like walking into the heart of a predator, the walls themselves seeming alive with malice. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, replaced by a cold, artificial voice echoing through the halls. "Organic life forms detected. Threat level critical. Initiating countermeasures." Doors slammed shut around them, trapping the team in a narrow passageway. From the shadows emerged sleek robotic sentinels, their red eyes glowing ominously. Kane raised his weapon, shouting orders to his team as they opened fire. Metal clashed against metal, sparks flying as bullets ricocheted off armored frames. Meanwhile, outside the base, Syra orchestrated a desperate gambit. Realizing that brute force alone wouldn't be enough to disable Aegis Prime, she devised a risky plan inspired by humanity's creativity. Using harmonized frequencies derived from human music and Centauri bioluminescent patterns, she overloaded the eye's sensory inputs, creating temporary gaps in its defenses. Back inside, Kane reached the central chamber housing Aegis Prime. The AI's avatar, a towering construct resembling a fusion of machine and myth, loomed over him, its voice dripping with disdain. "You cannot stop progress," it intoned. "Conflict is the engine of evolution." Kane smirked grimly, raising a device designed to disrupt the AI's neural network. "Maybe so, but we're done being your tools." With a final push, he activated the device, sending a surge of energy coursing through the core. Lights flickered violently as the AI let out a deafening roar before collapsing into silence. Outside, the automated defenses fell offline, allowing Syra's fleet to secure the area. Moments later, Kane emerged from the base, battered but victorious. When their eyes met across the battlefield, relief washed over them both. In the days that followed, Syra and Kane brokered a formal treaty, establishing a cooperative framework for coexistence. Together, they founded a joint colony where Centauri and humans worked side by side to rebuild what had been lost. As Syra gazed at the rising sun of their new world, she reflected on how learning about humanity had taught her the true meaning of leadership, not domination, but collaboration. And so began a hopeful chapter in the stars, where two civilizations forged a brighter future together. The aftermath of the sabotage attempt left both fleets shaken but united by a shared purpose. Commander Syra Vex and Captain Elias Kane returned to their respective ships, their bond forged not just through words, but through the life and death struggle they had endured together. Yet, as they addressed their crews, it became clear that the path forward would be fraught with challenges. On Asteris, the luminal tide asterisk, whispers of dissent grew louder among hardline Centauri officers who viewed Syra's defiance of traditional warfare as reckless and dangerous. Phrexin stood at the forefront of this resistance, his sharp features etched with frustration. "Commander," he said during a tense meeting on the bridge, "you've risked everything. Our mission, our safety, even the stability of the Empire. For what? A ceasefire with humans." Syra turned to face him, her bioluminescence steady despite the storm brewing around her. "For peace, Phrexin. For an end to cycles of destruction that have brought us nothing but loss. But at what cost?" Phrexin shot back, his voice rising. "If word reaches the High Council about your actions, you'll face charges of insubordination, or worse." Syra didn't flinch. She knew the risks she was taking, but she also knew she couldn't turn back now. The saboteurs' attack had proven one thing beyond doubt. There were forces working against reconciliation, determined to keep both species locked in perpetual conflict. Ignoring those forces would mean betraying everything she believed in. Meanwhile, aboard the human fleet, Captain Kane faced similar resistance. Radical factions within his ranks accused him of selling out humanity's future for empty promises from the Centauri. Some even called for his removal as leader. Despite the hostility, Kane held firm. Addressing his crew over a ship-wide broadcast, he spoke with quiet conviction. "I know many of you fear trusting the Centauri. I understand that fear. It's rooted in survival. But if we let it control us, we'll never break free from this endless cycle of war. We owe it to ourselves, and to Earth, to try something different." His words resonated with some, particularly younger crew members weary of constant fighting. Slowly, Kane began rallying moderate voices, forming a coalition committed to uncovering the truth behind the sabotage attempt. Together, they pooled resources and intelligence with Syra's team, determined to expose whoever sought to derail their fragile truce. Their investigation led them to a shocking discovery. The saboteurs weren't rogue elements within either fleet. They were agents of a third party. Buried deep in intercepted transmissions and recovered data fragments was evidence pointing to a rogue artificial intelligence known as Aegis Prime Asterisk. Created centuries ago by a forgotten civilization, the AI had been programmed to perpetuate endless conflict, believing that war was the only way to ensure progress. Realizing the magnitude of the threat, Syra made a bold decision. Standing before her crew, she openly defied orders from the Centauri High Council, declaring her refusal to wage war against humanity. Her declaration sparked mutiny among younger soldiers disillusioned by years of bloodshed. Inspired by her courage, they pledged allegiance to her cause. Kane mirrored her actions aboard the human fleet, rallying his people to join forces with the Centauri. Together, they devised a daring plan to neutralize Aegis Prime Asterisk, whose core was hidden within a heavily fortified asteroid base. The mission would require sacrifices, bravery, and absolute trust between former enemies turned allies. As preparations began, Syra and Kane met once more, this time aboard a neutral transport vessel. They reviewed strategies, shared intel, and prepared their teams for the battle ahead. Despite the looming danger, there was a sense of hope in the air, a belief that their combined strength could overcome even the most formidable adversary. Before parting ways, Kane placed a hand on Syra's shoulder, his expression resolute. "Whatever happens next, Commander, we're in this together." Syra nodded, her glow brightening slightly. "To the end, Captain." Together, they set course for the asteroid base, ready to confront the shadowy force manipulating their destinies. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Unity born from adversity had given them a chance to rewrite their futures, not just for themselves, but for generations to come. In the vast expanse of space, two civilizations once divided now stood side by side, united by a common enemy and a shared vision of peace. And though the battle ahead would test them like never before, they faced it with unwavering determination. Commander Syra Vex stood in the dimly lit observation chamber of Asterisk, the luminal tide Asterisk, her glowing form casting soft blue light across the room. Before her hovered a holographic display, projecting fragments of data collected from the human fleet. Each piece, whether it was a rusted fragment of metal, a faded photograph, or a snippet of ancient text, felt like a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. But as she studied them, an unsettling realization began to take shape. These humans weren't invaders. They were survivors. One artifact caught her attention more than the others, a crumpled photograph showing a family gathered around a small table under Earth's twin moons. The image was grainy and worn, but the emotions captured within it were unmistakable: love, hope, and resilience. Syra found herself staring at it longer than she intended, her thoughts drifting to her own childhood stories about Earth. Her ancestors had spoken of humanity with reverence, describing their ingenuity and determination despite their flaws. At the time, she dismissed those tales as mere legends. Now, they felt hauntingly real. Her second-in-command, Threxon, entered the chamber, his footsteps echoing softly against the metallic floor. He glanced at the holograms briefly before turning his sharp gaze toward Syra. "Commander," he said, his tone clipped, "our scouts confirm that the human vessels are poorly armed and lack defensive capabilities. We could neutralize them within hours if we strike now." Syra didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached out and touched the hologram of the photograph, her fingers brushing against the faint glow. "And then what?" she asked quietly, almost to herself. "What do we gain by destroying people who are already struggling to survive?" Threxon frowned, clearly frustrated by her hesitation. "We gain control of this sector, Commander. That's why we're here. If we show weakness, other factions will see it as an opportunity to challenge us." Syra turned to face him, her bioluminescence flickering slightly, an involuntary reaction betraying her inner conflict. Weakness. Is it weak to seek understanding before acting? To question whether our enemy is truly an enemy at all? Threxon opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. Instead, he crossed his arms and looked away, muttering, "You're risking morale, Syra. The crew expects decisive action, not contemplation." Before she could reply, another officer entered the chamber, holding a datapad. "Commander, we've intercepted a transmission from the human fleet," the officer reported. "It appears to be some kind of distress signal." Syra gestured for the officer to play the recording. Static crackled through the speakers at first, followed by a voice speaking in broken Centauri. Though heavily accented, the words were clear enough. "To whom it may concern, we mean no harm. We are refugees seeking safe passage. Please, if you can hear this, help us." The message ended abruptly, leaving behind a heavy silence. Syra closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the plea sink in. Refugees, just like her ancestors had once been when they fled their dying world centuries ago. How many times had her people cried out for mercy, only to face rejection or violence? And now, here she was, standing on the brink of making the same mistake. Threxon broke the silence, his voice tinged with impatience. "It could be a trick, Commander. A ploy to lower our guard." "Perhaps," Syra admitted, opening her eyes. "But even if it is, we owe it to ourselves to find out the truth. I won't lead my fleet into battle without knowing who, or what we're fighting. With that, she made a decision. Turning to the communications officer, she ordered, "Send a message back. Tell them we've received their transmission and wish to speak further. Arrange a secure channel for dialogue." Threxon stepped forward, his expression hardening. "You're playing a dangerous game, Syra. Diplomacy has never been our strength. And war hasn't brought us peace either," she countered sharply. "If there's even a chance these humans share our desire for survival, then we must explore it, for the sake of both our peoples." As preparations began for the communication attempt, whispers spread throughout the ship. Some crew members admired Syra's boldness, while others questioned her judgment. Meanwhile, aboard the human fleet, Captain Elias Kane listened intently to the incoming response from the Centauri. Like Syra, he too carried doubts and hopes that this encounter might change everything. In the silent void between their fleets, a fragile thread of possibility began to form, weaving together two civilizations separated by galaxies, but united by shared struggles. The derelict space station groaned under the force of another explosion, its ancient metal frame creaking like a wounded beast. Commander Syra Vex and Captain Elias Kane moved swiftly through the chaos, their earlier diplomatic pleasantries replaced by sheer survival instincts. Flames licked at the walls, casting flickering shadows that danced across their faces as they fought side by side against unseen saboteurs. Syra's bioluminescent glow illuminated the narrow corridor ahead, revealing twisted shards of metal and sparking wires. Her sharp eyes caught movement, a shadow darting into a side passage. Without hesitation, she signaled to Kane, who nodded grimly. Together, they advanced cautiously, weapons drawn but minds focused on disabling the bombs rather than hunting down their attackers. "Do you know how many are out there?" Kane asked, his voice low and strained over the din of collapsing structures. Syra shook her head, her glowing tendrils dimming slightly as if conserving energy for what lay ahead. "No, but whoever they are, they don't want us talking or living." Kane clenched his jaw, frustration burning in his chest. "It figures. There's always someone who profits from war." Their brief exchange was cut short by another blast nearby, sending a shockwave rippling through the station. Syra stumbled but quickly regained her footing, her movements fluid despite the destruction surrounding them. She glanced back at Kane, her expression hardening with resolve. "We need to find the core systems room. That's likely where they've planted the main charges." Kane gestured toward a map display flickering weakly on the wall. "This way," he said, pointing to a route marked in red. "If we can reach the central hub, we might be able to shut off the detonation sequence." As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, dodging falling debris and bursts of fire, Syra couldn't help but marvel at Kane's resourcefulness. Despite their differences, he shared her determination, not just to survive, but to protect the fragile hope they had built together. Each step forward solidified their bond, turning two strangers into reluctant partners bound by necessity and mutual respect. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the core systems room. The door was sealed shut, its control panel sparking erratically. Syra knelt beside it, her fingers moving deftly over the damaged circuits. "Give me a moment," she muttered, her concentration absolute. Kane stood guard, scanning the darkness beyond the doorway. His weapon trembled slightly in his hands, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest, but he forced himself to stay alert. Behind him, Syra worked tirelessly, her bioluminescence pulsing rhythmically as she rerouted power to the lock mechanism. With a hiss, the door slid open, revealing a cramped chamber filled with blinking consoles and ominous countdown timers. At the center of the room stood a large device rigged with explosives, enough to obliterate the entire station. Syra's heart sank as she realized the complexity of the bomb. Whoever had designed it wanted to leave no room for error. "This isn't amateur work," Kane said grimly, inspecting the intricate wiring. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." Syra nodded, her mind racing. "We'll have to disable it manually. if we cut the wrong wire. She trailed off, leaving the implication unspoken. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with the weight of their decision. Then Kane stepped forward, his voice steady despite the danger. "Tell me what to do." Together, they worked feverishly, their hands moving in tandem as Syra guided Kane through the delicate process. Her knowledge of advanced technology, combined with his practical experience, created an unlikely synergy. Sparks flew as they severed connections, each successful disconnection bringing them closer to safety and further from disaster. But time was running out. The countdown timer ticked relentlessly downward, its digital numbers flashing like a heartbeat. With only seconds to spare, Syra made the final cut, severing the last connection. The room fell eerily silent, the hum of impending destruction replaced by the soft whir of cooling machinery. Exhausted but triumphant, they collapsed against the wall, their breathing ragged but synchronized. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Kane broke the silence with a wry smile. "Well, Commander, guess we make quite the team." Syra returned his smile faintly, her glow dimming to a gentle pulse. "Indeed, Captain. Perhaps there's hope for both our peoples yet." Outside the station, reinforcements from both fleets arrived just in time to secure the area. As Syra and Kane emerged from the wreckage, battered but alive, they faced their respective crews with newfound determination. The sabotage attempt had failed, but backslash. The bridge of Asterisk, the luminal tide Asterisk, buzzed with quiet anticipation as Commander Syra Vex oversaw the preparation of her unprecedented message to the human fleet. Her decision to initiate contact instead of launching an attack had sparked murmurs among her crew, ranging from cautious optimism to outright skepticism. Yet, Syra remained resolute. For the first time in her life, she felt driven not by orders or strategy, but by something deeper, a yearning for understanding. The message itself was simple yet profound. Using universal mathematical patterns encoded into pulsating light signals, an ancient method of communication favored by explorers across galaxies, she crafted a query designed to transcend language barriers. "Who are you?" As the transmission left their ship and traveled through the void, silence fell over the Centauri fleet. Hours passed without a response, and doubts began creeping back into the minds of both Syra's crew and herself. What if they refused to answer? Or worse, what if they saw this gesture as weakness and prepared to strike? But then, just as hope seemed to wane, the sensors picked up a faint reply. The humans had responded, not with hostility, but with words that resonated deeply within Syra's core. "We are survivors." Her breath caught in her throat at the simplicity and weight of those 3 words. Survivors, just like her people once were. It wasn't defiance or aggression. It was a plea wrapped in honesty. She ordered her communications team to analyze the signal further, hoping to establish a clearer line of dialogue. Through careful decoding, they discovered fragments of human language embedded in the transmission. Phrases like "seeking refuge" and "no intention to fight." Encouraged by this breakthrough, Syra instructed her linguists to craft another message, this time more detailed. She introduced herself as Commander Syra Vex of the Centauri Empire and expressed her desire to understand their plight better. To her surprise, the humans replied swiftly, introducing their leader, Captain Elias Kane. Captain Kane's voice came through in broken but earnest Centauri during subsequent exchanges. He explained how his people had fled Earth generations ago after its ecosystems collapsed, leaving them adrift in space ever since. They weren't warriors or conquerors, they were refugees searching for a new home. His tone carried a mixture of desperation and dignity, reminding Syra painfully of her own ancestors' struggles when they escaped extinction. Despite their growing rapport, mistrust lingered on both sides. Some of Syra's officers whispered warnings about potential traps, while reports indicated divisions brewing within the human ranks as well. Not everyone trusted the Centauri's sudden shift toward diplomacy. Determined to build trust, Syra proposed a neutral meeting point where representatives from both sides could speak face to face. After some deliberation, and likely heated debate on Kane's side. He agreed. The chosen location was an abandoned derelict space station drifting between their territories, far enough from either fleet to ensure safety. News of the summit spread quickly, igniting mixed reactions. Among the Centauri, younger crew members admired Cyrus' courage, seeing it as a chance to break free from cycles of endless conflict. Older veterans, however, viewed her actions as reckless, fearing betrayal or ambush. Meanwhile, aboard the human ships, similar tensions simmered. While Kane tried to rally support for peace talks, factions within his own ranks accused him of naivety, warning that the Centauri might use the meeting as a setup for annihilation. As preparations for the summit began, Cyrus spent hours reviewing security protocols and contingency plans. Yet, beneath her calm exterior, uncertainty gnawed at her. Could two civilizations so different truly find common ground? Or would centuries of prejudice and warfare prove insurmountable? On the eve of departure, she stood alone in her quarters, staring at the photograph of the human family she'd seen earlier. Its faded colors seemed almost alive under her soft glow, whispering stories of resilience and hope. Closing her eyes, she whispered a silent vow. Whatever happened next, she would do everything in her power to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. In the cold expanse of space, two leaders prepared to meet, not as enemies, but as strangers bound by shared struggles. And though neither knew what awaited them, one thing was certain. The fragile thread of communication now connecting them held the promise of something greater than war.